Ag Committee will come to order. Clerk, if you'd read or ask for quorum.
Chair Nyer,
Here.
Representative Woods, here. Leitner,
Here.
Alexander,
Here.
Fox,
Present.
Coons,
Here.
Pavlo,
Here.
Pies,
Present.
Dievendorf, here. Reingens,
Here.
Skaggs. Mr. Chair, you have 10 members present. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Representative Alexander moves to adopt the meetings, the minutes from February 20th meeting. Without objection, minutes are adopted. First on the agenda of the day, I'd like to welcome the Michigan potato growers who have come to make a presentation. Kelly Turner, at this time, along with your guests, would you please come to the chairs?
Thanks for having us today, everybody. We're excited to be here. Today is Potato Day at the Capitol, so the timing worked out really well. You get to listen to a lot of other folks from the industry today and not just me. I'm Dr. Turner. I do work for both the Michigan Potato Industry Commission and the Potato Growers of Michigan. You'll hear more about how those fit together a little bit later. I do want to start off with, though, about a year ago, we conducted an economic impact study using researchers at Michigan State University, their economic department, and we were a little bit surprised ourselves. So the last information we had is that we contributed quite a few $1 million to the state's economic growth each year. And so when the numbers came back, we were like, wow, we're cooler than we thought we were. So a total of $2.5 billion with a B dollars of economic impact to the state annually. So that includes $1.5 billion of direct economic activity. So that's from growing the potatoes, processing them, wholesaling them, and retailing them in your grocery stores. Then we add an additional $1 billion worth of economic activity from the related industries and consumption of potatoes. So that's like people that eat out at restaurants and things like that. So we're pretty excited to share that information with you because this report really highlights the positive impact that the industry has on creating jobs for both rural and urban citizens in the state. And you're going to hear a little bit more about that later, but it really demonstrates that potatoes are a major agricultural commodity here in the state, second only to apples. So when it comes to the amount, so 2 years ago, Michigan growers produced 1.9 billion pounds of potatoes, and that's across all the categories that we grow here in the state. So that includes seed potatoes, frozen, dehydrated, potatoes for processing other than potato chips. So canned potatoes, potato chips are, of course, one of our larger commodities that we create from those potatoes. Generating $246 million just in economic activity from the sale of those potatoes annually. That puts Michigan 8th largest state in potato production across the United States and 6th largest in terms of sales. What that means is we actually create a higher value potato in the state, so we get paid more per hundredweight than other states do. So. This report really cements the fact that potatoes are not only America's favorite vegetable, but also really an essential component to the state's economic growth and activity. So I'm going to introduce Callie to kind of explain the breakdown of potatoes that we grow in this state.
Hello, everyone. I'm Callie Bagley. My family and I own and operate a 40-year-old kettle chip company out of Waterford, Michigan. Thanks for having us. We're really proud to say that there are no small potatoes. In fact, 1 in every 4 bag of chips across the United States contains Michigan potatoes. And also, everyone in the state of Michigan and outside states can also go to their grocery store and get Michigan potatoes as well. We're pushing really hard at the federal level to ensure that potatoes remain on the school breakfast programs. They are a healthy, economical part of children's diets, and we want to make sure that they stay there. of the Michigan crop, 20% of the potatoes grown in the state go for fresh potatoes, so what you can buy bagged at the grocery store. 5% go to seed potatoes, which help create next year's crop. The other 5% go for processing, like Kelly said, for canning and other processing opportunities. And then also the other 70% of that are grown specifically for chipping for companies like Phil and I.
Oh, All right, Phil, I'm gonna switch seats with you maybe because this is a little, I don't think it reaches to you.
Okay. Thanks, Kelly. So, hi everyone. My name is Phil Gasmano. I work at Better Made Snack Foods. We have been in business since 1930. We've been in the city of Detroit since our inception in 1930, and I'm here today to tell you how important agriculture is in an urban environment. Without agriculture in our state, we at Better Made would not employ close to 280 people in an urban environment where we pay a living wage that allows people to earn their money, but the relationship between urban and agriculture is strong, and we pride ourselves on buying local and being local. Michigan potatoes offer phenomenal opportunities. We have worked with the potato industry, with Michigan State University to help develop varieties that have allowed us to store potatoes in the state of Michigan. Until recently, like 10 years ago, we used to have to actually go get fresh potatoes in April, May, June, and July outside of our state. But we have developed, through working with Michigan State University and the Michigan Potato Industry Commission, some varieties that store that whole length of time. There's some great growers in this room that provide us with potatoes year-round. And that is a phenomenal, in the chipping industry, that is a phenomenal feat that has been achieved. We're excited to be here in the state today. We're excited that we have the opportunity to show you what we do and how we do it. At Better Made, I know some of you have actually been through our factory. It is a great learning experience for some of the other representatives who may not be on the agricultural committee. We are making the offer today. If anyone ever would like to come and see what we do and how we do it, we like to think that we're an important part of agriculture, and we can help educate people on how it works in our state. So,
Thanks, Phil. So you heard a little bit about the industry, and so now we're going to kind of help you understand, like, how do these organizations within the state really support this industry that creates such a huge economic impact to the state. So we have, technically there are 3 organizations. The Seed Potato Association was not able to make it today. They actually certify all the seed potatoes. That it's a job that the state of Michigan is supposed to do. The seed growers have taken it upon themselves to create their own organization that's under supervision of MDARD, and they pay for all of the certifications and stuff themselves instead of putting that burden back on the state. Who we have with us in the room today, we have the Michigan Potato Industry Commission. We have several growers and processors here who are actually commissioners currently. And that really, that organization was started in 1970, and the focus of that is to ensure that we have a viable industry within the state. And we do that through research and marketing and education. So education of our growers and also education of consumers. The second organization really is the advocacy arm of the industry, and that's the Potato Growers of Michigan. That's a voluntary association that growers belong to so that they can speak to folks like you to really help you understand what their needs are when it comes to creating rules, regulation, and legislation within the state. Some of the strategic goals that the commission has is talent development. So you may have heard that people really have a hard time getting enough folks throughout the workforce to do what they need to do, especially in agriculture. We've got 2 seasons, harvest and spring planting, that are really, really tight timelines, and it's difficult to find people who have the skill sets and are willing to work those long hours to be able to get those jobs done. The second is providing research and sustainability direction. So we do work directly with Michigan State University. We pay for 2 full-time positions there on a team called the Potato Outreach Team. They are nationally and internationally known for the work that they're doing in creating new varieties of potatoes and breeding potatoes so that potatoes can use less water and fewer nutrient inputs and are more resistant to different pests so that we can reduce our chemical usage. So it really aligns very well with being able to sustain the industry for a long period of time. Potatoes are really tough to grow, and it takes a lot of information to be able to grow a crop that has high nutrient value, is high quality, yet can use fewer inputs. We also lead promotion of the farms and potatoes to people in the state. It is a little bit heartbreaking to me when people are like, we grow potatoes in Michigan? Yes, and we grow a lot of them. We are the chipping capital of the nation. We grow more chipping potatoes than anyone else, and we're really, really good at it. The last piece is fostering economic growth initiatives. I think some of these kind of go through what I just talked about. When it comes to economic activities, we're always looking to attract new processing facilities to the state. There's a huge demand for frozen product, and we just don't have enough places that can produce those, process those in the state of Michigan. So always looking to attract new processors to the state, and there's always new technology. So currently wine chips is also in Michigan, and I don't know if you've ever had the cereal Crispix. They have like the triangle cut and they're puffy. Wine chips are the same thing, only they're paired with certain flavorings that go well with certain kinds of wine. So kind of a niche market, but we attracted them here to Michigan from California. So we're always looking for kind of anything that will create more demand for potatoes, not only in the state, but in surrounding states as well. So now I'm going to take a minute here and introduce to you Dennis Ayatt, who is the owner of Ayatt Seed Farm in Kalkaska. Dennis is also the president of the Potato Growers of Michigan. And so he's gonna kind of go through what their priorities are when it comes to advocacy over the next year. Okay. I won't leave you by yourself, I promise.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having us here today. I'm president of Potato Growers of Michigan. We are, as Kelly said, the legislative advocates for potato growers in Michigan. We work with Tony Deschen at Michigan Legislative Consultants. Hopefully he and Kelly get you all the information you need on anything that might affect what we're up to. So our focus is on ensuring growers have access to what they need to contribute to the economy. And we try to provide good information to elected officials and regulators to help us solve the problems. Our key policy priorities, the first one is water. Most potatoes in Michigan are irrigated. We use quite a bit of water. Water quality and availability are important. I always tell everybody groundwater in Michigan is renewable. The swamps fill up, the lakes fill up, the groundwater fills up every year. We want to ensure water-related policies don't negatively impact agriculture. We oppose efforts to commoditize water. We support investment in Michigan's water withdrawal assessment tool to make it more accurate and more useful. A policy priority is labor. Labor costs account for 35% of variable expenses in most vegetable production. Shortage of workers is always a problem. We want to ensure that we have access to a guest worker program to supplement domestic labor needs. Growers require a full range of pest management tools, chemicals, fertilizers. The long-term success of Michigan depends on protecting farmland from competing interests. We want to make sure we have continued access to those plant nutrients and protectants. One issue that bothers me is we need to protect farmland from being converted to solar and other green energy. There's critical acreage. Michigan needs, I've heard, 200,000 acres for solar. And if that was 2 acres on 100,000 farms, it'd be one thing, but it's going to be 300 acres at a time. If I lose 300 acres out of my farm from landlords that rent that land, I've lost 10% of my sales. That's an issue. It's a local issue more than it is a widespread issue. It's a problem. Less than 2% of the U.S. population is involved in agriculture, so there's widespread misunderstanding about what we do. It's critical to educate consumers, retailers, and policymakers, of course, is why we're here. Michigan potato industry is vital to the state's economy. PGMI advocates for science-based policies that balance sustainability with viability, and we're here to collaborate with legislators and regulators to make sure we provide the information you need. The two threats that I see locally to individual farms are competition from solar. There's offers being made for rental prices that are 10 times what we pay for rent, and unnecessary, unscientific water regulations. I think we do a good job of monitoring our water use and our well monitoring system, and we struggle to make that work every day. So thank you all for your time.
Thanks, Dennis. We can take questions. We wanted to make sure we were respectful of your time today. The Potato Growers of Michigan put on what we call food and facts tours annually, so you'll be getting invitations to those. We like to take you to see either a processor or a farm, or sometimes both in the same day, so that you can really see on the ground. The pictures don't do it justice. So the picture that's on your the left-hand side of the screen, that is like a football field-sized room filled almost 3 stories tall with potatoes. You can't get a sense of what that is unless you're actually standing there. So we can show you pictures all day long, but we really want to invite you to come out and see how they operate, how they store potatoes, and what sets Michigan apart from other states in production. So any questions?
Thank you, Kelly and the team. Okay, I'm going to ask Representative Reingas to speak.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. I recently have learned a lot about Michigan State University's really innovative research, and I know that your presentation referenced working with them. And I'm curious what kind of experience you have working with the Lab for Innovation, or the Innovation Lab for Food Security Policy Research, Policy, and Influence. Do you work with them at all for that?
In a roundabout way. So Dave Dauschis, Dr. Dauschis, is one of the most renowned potato breeders in the nation and internationally.
That's what I just recently learned, yes.
Yes, and he does a lot of work, so specifically with potatoes. So he had, this is probably a 4-letter word in some places, a USAID.
I was curious if that is impacting you. So with the elimination of USAID and some of the stop work orders that we've seen even here down the street at the world-renowned potato research, how is that affecting you in the industry? I'm really worried about that.
Yep, so let me explain the connection, right? So on the surface, people might not see how does working with different communities in South Africa on genetically modified potatoes relate back to Michigan. So first of all, they're really helping those communities in Africa to be able to produce potatoes. So they showed us pictures of the potatoes that they were growing there, and they had someone who was only wearing like a t-shirt and a short pair of shorts, barefooted, just spraying some chemicals, right? And we all know we've got the EPA, there are standards for protections, for worker protections that we follow here. So in order to help them not to have to spray and to be able to have potatoes that live through to tuberization and actual harvest, they're using genetically modified breeding styles to be able to produce a crop that can feed those communities. How that relates back to the United States. So there are huge pushes for sustainability. We've talked about using less water, using less nitrogen, using less phosphorus. How do we protect our waterways? And we have to be able to use breeding technology to be able to get to those next levels. Potato has twice as many chromosomes as a person, and they're really difficult to breed. And they're not like kind of breeding dogs and cats, right, where you're like, oh, we'll get like a Shih Tzu and something else together and we create something else. Potatoes, you can pull different traits from them, but then when you breed them, it's like putting them in a blender and blending it up, and you're like, oh, okay, we'll see what we get out of this. It takes a long time. It's 10 years to get a new variety from conception to the possibility of commercialization. So people are very on edge when you talk about GMOs and that kind of technology here in the United States. So doing that research in other countries that are welcoming it because their people are starving helps us to understand that technology so that at some point we can then employ it here in the United States. You're welcome.
Representative Ward.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to first thank you for bringing to light the issue of the water situation. I hail from Branch County, and so I was involved a few years ago in the potential of Prairie River being reclassified, and I'm just wondering if you could give a little more background on that, because I think people don't understand the importance and the risk that's at stake there and what will happen if that's reclassified, and a precedence that it will set statewide.
Yes, so this goes back to why would farmers care about this, right? It goes back to the water withdrawal assessment tool. It is not based off of water, it is based off of fish populations. And streams are classified based off of the temperature of that stream and flow of that stream. And so you've got the Prairie River that the DNR felt should be reclassified to a cold stream from a cold transitional stream. And
Correct.
what that would do if that were the case, it would reduce the amount of water that farmers are able to withdraw from groundwater in that area down to over 50% of what they're currently drawing down.
Well, it also based on the assessment tool, which is coarse.
Faulty.
Very coarse
Coarse.
and
Yes.
faulty. It was meant to be a screening tool. It was never meant to be
And
a
now it's being-
scientific measure.
Yeah, now it's being used as a regulatory tool. So we've asked the DNR through the Water Use Advisory Council. We've expressed our concerns. The DNR is going back and they are collecting 3 more years worth of data to look at that, because the data that the farmers had that spanned, that bridged the original data collection from the DNR, we showed that if you look at any sort of data, right, you've got the peaks and valleys, and the 3 years they measured was definitely a low year. It was a drought year, so water was low, stream temperatures were different. The information that the farmers have been collecting for over a decade showed that the peaks and valleys exist, and so you can't look at just one small point in time and make this very large decision. So if they do decide to reclassify the Prairie River, it is highly likely that they will employ those same set of tactics and standards to look at all of the streams within the state. So most people here love to fish as well. We definitely need to protect the fish populations. The problem comes down to we're using the water withdrawal assessment tool as a regulatory tool now instead of a tool that it was designed to be, which is to give us a sense of, do we need to look closer?
Thank you. And one secondary question, you mentioned solar panels, and I'd just be curious if you could confirm or deny this myth that you could grow potatoes under solar panels. I've heard that told a lot from
No.
the other side who now left.
The
But
other thing with solar panels is no food safety person would ever allow you to grow potatoes in an old solar field,
correct.
because there's going to be glass and wire and plastic in that field. Anything grown in the soil would have the possibility of being contaminated. It would never happen.
Okay. Representative Kuntz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Doctor, thank you for coming. Twice you've mentioned the water assessment tool. Do you have suggestions? Have you had correspondence with the DEQ? Are they, almost a silly question, I understand. Are they receptive at all to that? And then my 7th question, what can we do to help?
Right. Fantastic question. So I actually am Jason Walther, who's in the audience. Jason sits on the Water Use Advisory Council. I'm his alternate, and then I also co-chair the Water Conservation and Efficiency Subcommittee of that council. So we are heavily involved in those conversations. It's really it's a tough line to walk, right? Because we need to make sure we are protecting the water in the state. But we also have to make sure that we're not being so restrictive that we are denying a use that would not damage that, right? So making sure that we're not denying businesses that have been here for hundreds of years, like the farmers, the ability to water their crops, while at the same time, we're asking businesses to move to the state and to set up new shops here that are gonna withdraw as much, if not more, water from that same location.
Right, so we have to have a tool. Do you have specific suggestions to make the water withdrawal tool better?
So there is a data committee and all sorts of subcommittees that are working through that, and they have made suggestions for changes and updates to those tools, and I believe there is an ask that we just put together our recommendations at the end of 2024, and so there is an ask that's been presented or will shortly be being presented from those at the Water Use Advisory Council. So it seems like a lot of money, but we need to understand what we have for water resources, because right now it's like writing checks out of a checkbook that you don't know what the balance is in the bank.
Thank you very much.
Representative Fox.
Thank you, Chair. And just a couple things. I think that I'm here as a result of the Irish potato famine. I grew up in the Irish Hills here in Michigan. So, but long story short, I now live in the district where we have Arbor Farms and Carnamont Farms and some of those names that you'd recognize. They make harvesters there in our neck of the woods too. So very supportive, and stand with you. I want you to know, stand with you with your questions about solar and about this unnecessary and unscientific water analysis that goes on. I would love to have a tour sometime from Better Made or from others. And here comes my question. Long ago, I remember National Geographic with a variety of potatoes on the front cover. And, the big deal was that's where all of our potatoes came from originally, was the Andes. And is that still the case with these guys who are researching? Are they still drawing from that gene pool?
They absolutely are, yes. So they have, they actually grow them, the original varieties, and they use those to breed and crossbreed new varieties of potatoes. So you can see them grown at the research farm that MSU owns in Montcalm.
Montcalm, okay. Very good. Well, thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Representative Pies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Fox may have given me a little bit of an idea. I was wondering where the majority of potatoes are grown in Michigan, and I believe they originated in the Andes. Yeah. I recall a presentation. I was on Ag Committee last term, and I recall a presentation where you talked about all kinds of the potatoes and storage. But those are just my questions. Thank you. About where they're grown mostly. Where am I going to find the most farms?
I got the question.
Apparently in Representative Fox's district, but I'm wondering where else.
Yep. Can I be a true Michigander and just use my hand?
That would be
for a
perfect.
moment? So potatoes grow very well in sandy soils, and so you've got a strip of sandy soil down here near the border, the southern border, and so we have a grower from southeastern Michigan down here with us today, and we've got some growers from southwest Michigan here with us today, and then kind of in this middle part of the state that it touches the thumb too, we have quite a few potatoes grown there. Northern Michigan across the top here, and then in the UP, so Newberry, and then the far west end where they grow a lot of seed potatoes, because they like that separation to ensure that we're not catching, to keep them safe from viruses and different things. The county, though, that grows the most potatoes in the state is Montcalm County.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Not seeing any other questions there. Thank you, Kelly and the team, for interesting presentation.
Thanks for having us. And you will be receiving invitations to come visit.
Next on our agenda will be hearing testimony on House Bill 4017. Chair will go to these.
The committee will come to order. Chair Nyer, please begin when you are ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair and the committee. Excuse me. I'm here to testify today on support of House Bill 4017, which will reduce the penalty for not reporting an accident or death on a family farm operation in a timely manner. These family operations are formed with LLC corporations, limited partnerships, and a variety of other corporations there for various reasons. Currently, underneath my OSHA law, any company, regardless of size, must report an accidental death within 8 hours of it occurring, even if the death occurs during on a company family operation, farm operation. As you might imagine, during that time period when there is dealing with such a tragedy, it's very difficult to think about reporting to any type of agency about something like that happening, especially when that's personal. And so this expectation of having to do that is unrealistic during that time of stress. What this bill will allow is a reduction of the mandatory fee by 80%, or mandatory penalty by 80%. And this bill was originally brought up by former Representative Colley, and it managed to make it to the governor's desk, but was vetoed down on a technicality of the definition of a family farm. That since has been fixed in this bill that I'm presenting today, and I would ask your support for this bill, and willing to take questions.
The chair recognizes Representative Pies.
Thank you. We're all learning here still. Thank you, Representative Nyer, Chair Nyer. Do we have an idea of how often there are deaths on family farms, working farms, like annually? Or?
I don't have a statistic for you, but it does occur on all operations there. Farming is considered one of the more hazardous occupations there. Okay. This bill simply goes in and gives gives those families a little bit of leeway to deal with the tragedy at hand without being financially burdened by this. An example you hear shortly there, a fine was assessed in excess of $10,000. The family was not aware of the situation or of the need to report, and it was a very difficult ordeal dealing with the department in this situation.
Right. Okay, thank you.
The chair recognizes Representative Leitner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I remember this. I did serve with Representative Colley, and we've had some incidents in Jackson County as well. And I don't remember the technicalities of the legislation in those in that legislature, but why are we just decreasing the penalty and not just increasing the time? Was time in the first part of Brana's bill before, and is it just a MIOSHA issue? I mean, because to me, time is the biggest thing. I mean, 8 hours is nothing. when you're dealing with tragedy, because we've all faced plenty of that. And, you know, you have so many other things that you're dealing with at the moment, and dealing with, you know, government department is the least of our worries. So why not an exemption of time, like to, you know, take it out 24 to 48 hours. I mean, most of the time these are, like you said, it's a family farm, less than 10 employees. So it's not like it, you know, you're deliberately causing these things on your farm necessarily to happen. You know what I mean? So like, why not an extension of time as well as the financial exemption?
From what I understand, and the reason why we couldn't do it, Senate or Representative Colley couldn't do it, and we can't do it here, is an entanglement with the federal MIOSHA. Federal MIOSHA oversees Michigan MIOSHA, and so there's some things, there's only a limited amount that we can do here at state. I'd personally like to eliminate the fine completely. We cannot do that without having to change federal MIOSHA. So we're doing what we can here in this bill. I'll continue to work with my congressman to try and see what we can't do at the federal level to get the same recognition for a family farm operation and move forward there. But here's a good solid step that we can do forward, moving forward. We'll do what we can to educate up the family operations, the farm operations on their obligations as far as meeting regulations. But plain and simple, this is a regulation that's a one-size-fits-all. If you're a corporation, regardless of your size, whether you're a two-man operation, a one-man operation, or employ over 1,000 people, this is a one-size-fits law that MIOSHA chooses to endorse.
Okay. And then, you know, I'm just thinking about the processes, right? And thank you for that explanation. And please bear with me as this is my first year ever on a policy committee. So I'm learning some things. But my other comment or maybe question or something to consider is why not put the burden on the law enforcement too, to educate the families or the entity that you have to report this. You know, we do a lot of that silliness in making another entity, you know, give people like landlord-tenant relations. You make the courts or the entities print all your rights on a form, you know, when you're breaking the law. Why not put something in there, some language that law enforcement also has to be educated on the rule, you know, for these situations, because it's not like they happen all the time. But, you know, this would be a simple thing that even our law enforcement could be educated on, like in my county, and just say, hey, when we have these, you know, it's just part of their continued training. When we have these type of incidences, please remind the family or whoever, the point of contact, that a reporting requirement is in place with MIOSHA, and make them provide that information so we don't even have to deal with the fines.
There have been attempts, and I'm not sure on MIOSHA's part, but Farm Bureau has, and other groups have taken up the mantle there to try and get the law enforcement up to speed, and also try and inform different farm groups of the importance to have an emergency action plan and to get that done. So it is in the works, but I'm sure as we draw attention to this issue there'll be some more renewed efforts to try and make sure that our EMTs and law enforcement officials that are called out to unfortunate situations like this can help the family through this.
Thank you. I do have one question, Rep. Nyer, and I asked you this personally, but could you speak to this on the fact that about extending it to in-laws, son-in-laws, daughter-in-laws? There's lots of family farms that, you know, the scope might seem a bit narrow when it's, for example, I would be a daughter-in-law in our family. So why can that not be extended to include those?
The definition that the governor suggested or would like into this bill the last time that was vetoed there is very specific there. It's going to take a little bit of a lift to try and get that definition changed, because I believe that's also in federal statute.
Rep. Leitner.
Okay, that takes me also back to the farm manager, because, you know, we do have, even in my area, Jackson, Calhoun, Eaton County, farms where the farm manager, they still might be under the 10 employees, but the farm manager actually isn't a family member. And that's kind of like an exclusion. So is there any type of exemption for, as long as it's under the 10, or is that also a federal with the farm manager?
The farm manager, if he isn't a direct member of the family, as in the.
Even though like 9 of the 10 are family members? Okay.
Yeah, yep. If no other questions.
No other questions? Okay,
I'd
all
like to
right.
invite, we'll switch out.
Okay, yes. We'll go at ease. I was gonna say house, and I was like, that's all right. Committee will stand at ease.
We'll come to order. This time, I'd like to invite the Eisenman family to testify. Begin, please.
Push your red button there.
Thanks. Good morning. My name is Barbara Eisman. I'm here today with my brother-in-law Zell, and who is a partner with my husband Keith on our family farm operation. Also with me is Keith's youngest brother Noel. I would like to thank Representative Jerry Nyer and you, the Agricultural Committee, for listening to our story. For most, if not all of you, this will be the first time hearing our story. But we have already shared it twice in the past 4 years to both the Agriculture Committee and the Economic and Small Business Development Committee. We do respect and have an understanding of the importance of laws in the workplace. But we have a desire to see the current reporting law fine reduced so that it fits the size and the structure of the business more appropriately, especially when it comes to small family farms. Our farm was fined $5,000 for not reporting the death to MIOSHA within 8 hours, along with an additional $12,000 for a different fine. As you can imagine, this has been a very emotional journey, having to present our story multiple times. However, I am here to honor my husband, Keith Eisman, and his legacy as a farmer. He prioritized his life in order: faith, family, and farm. He was my junior high sweetheart and my best friend. Keith graduated from Michigan State University in 1973 and earned many agriculture awards in high school, college, and later in his farming career. He was a father of 4 and a grandfather of 9. Involved in church, agriculture, and our Blissfield community, where he was well respected. The tragedy of that night, November 26, 2019, will forever be a part of my life. 2 days before Thanksgiving, my daughter and her family drove into our driveway from Nashville, Tennessee. At the exact moment, I received a phone call from my brother-in-law, Zell. He was sobbing uncontrollably, telling me he had found Keith on the barn floor and he was gone. In that moment, my life and the lives of our families changed forever. Arriving at the barn with my daughter, I saw Keith on the floor and bent down and held him in my arms, knowing that he was already gone. Zell was nearby, sitting on the barn floor, crying. The EMTs arrived and asked me to step away so they could try and resuscitate him. The sheriff's and coroner's offices started to arrive and began asking questions and taking statements about what had occurred, when we last spoke with Keith, and general events of the day leading up to the accident. We also received Keith's personal effects and were given information from the Victims Services Office about who to contact if we needed assistance. What's what you mentioned in that. During all this, my daughter had to call her siblings and Keith's siblings to notify them. Throughout the evening, neighbors, friends, and family began to arrive at the barn as the word spread in our small, close-knit community. We remained gathered in the barn until the ambulance took Keith's body away, at which point many of us came back to our house as we waited for family and those traveling from a distance to arrive. Many people did not leave until well after midnight. To expect anyone who had just lost a spouse or a brother, as we did, to call a government agency and notify them of a death during the first 8 hours I have just described, and then penalize them with a maximum fine for not doing so, is unrealistic, heartless, and cruel. We were in shock, and having to answer so many questions and replay the events of the evening left our minds swirling and our hearts breaking. Even if we had known this reporting requirement, we would not have been in a state of mind to do so. The difficulty did not end that night. The next morning, after a sleepless night, I received a phone call from Gifts of Life where I had to give a very detailed medical history and personal information, answering a long list of questions regarding Keith's eligibility to donate bone and tissue, which I'm happy to say he continued to give even in death. Over the next several days during our deepest grief, we also had to go through our first Thanksgiving holiday without Keith, plan how to harvest the remaining acres of corn still left in the field, make arrangements for a funeral, and write an obituary, all while accepting gifts and visitors that continuously stop by. Our next several days during our deepest grief, we also had to go through our first after that, the following Monday, a farm meeting and luncheon was organized by a family friend, and fellow farmers came together to graciously give us assistance in our final harvest, which took place on Wednesday. Just as many of those farmers and from our community were completing our harvest late that afternoon, a gentleman from Myosha came to my door to ask questions about the accident. It had been a long, very emotional day for all of us. I asked him if we could do this another time, but he told me he wasn't leaving my property until these questions were answered. I called Zell and asked him to come and help me out. Zell then came to answer questions and take him to the barn so he could go over things so he could complete his report. It was never our intent to hide anything, but these hours and days after trauma were long, draining, and filled with grief. It is our desire today to see this reporting fine law reduced, as it was another aspect of trauma and financial hardship for our farm and family. It's not fair to compare a small family farm to that of a corporation who would most likely employ a human resource officer to handle those matters. There's been a standard by which this law is administered. There has to be a standard by which this law is administered and applied, other than just the fact that it's a corporation. A reduced fine would spare other small family farms a burdensome financial penalty due to an unrealistic reporting time in the midst of our grief, should they ever experience an accidental death. This can be accomplished by passing House Bill 4017. I thank you all for taking the time to listen to my story. My hope is in Christ.
On a lighter note, following the potato crew, I just feel very hungry. I'm sorry. But good morning, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to share our story. My name is Zell Eisman. I'm here with my wife Rita, back here, and my sister-in-law Barb, and my brother Noel. I'm a third-generation farmer from Blissfield, and currently I'm the last Eisman to farm the property that my grandfather started farming almost 100 years ago. Up until November 26, 2019, our business consisted of my brother Keith, myself, as 50-50 business partners. We had 3 part-time seasonal employees that help with planting and harvesting, and on that evening I returned from harvesting corn in the field and found my brother deceased, as Barb has mentioned. We had anticipated heavy winds that day because a storm was supposed to come into the area, and he was making minor repairs on the roof. The local rescue personnel came to assist us after they had left a couple of hours later, we met as family with our children, friends, and pastors to console one another. That evening, I lost my brother, one of my best friends, my business partner, and 50% of my year-round workforce. We're here today to ask the committee to review the current policy regarding reporting accidents and fines for small farms related to MIOSHA. First and foremost, we understand the value of the agency and its purpose to protect employee safety in the workforce. We do feel, however, as Barb mentioned, that every workplace is different, and this one-size-fits-all does not work in this situation. A small business with 2 to 5 employees is not the same as one of the big 3 who has thousands of employees, but both are treated equally in regards to reporting times and fine amounts. The fines levied to my farm were over 2 times my seasonal employees' payroll for the year. A blanket policy seems to work until a situation arises where it doesn't, and I think our situation is a reflection of that. In our conversation with the OSHA inspector, and he was at our farm several times doing the inspection, he indicated that all home businesses fall under their jurisdiction. And I want you to think about that for a moment. How many of us have maybe a wife doing bookwork or family members doing work in the home? And I think that's more prevalent now since COVID. But according to him, they have jurisdiction over home businesses. So that's something to consider, maybe not for this committee, but other committees that might have this happen. A large business will likely have a compliance officer who's emotionally detached from an accident and the individual involved, and therefore is able to handle the required reporting process. In our case, you could say, my brother, he was the president of our corporation. You could say he was our compliance officer, and that did not happen. We ask that you look at current policies, some of which are almost 30 years old, and support this bill. There's no law or fine by any agency that will cause me to be safer on my farm than going through the death of a loved one. More time is needed for families to grieve and report an accident on a timely manner. And I just want to respond to Rep. Leitner's comment over there about the process of reporting the fine and the definition of a family farm. The way the bill reads, and I know this can't be changed at this point, but my question would be to the governor what her definition is of a family. By this definition, my brother and I we're not family. But when we were 6 years old, we were. And it's been 5 years since the accident. But we're not here for us. We're here for other people. Since this process has happened, I've had numerous phone calls from other farmers that have gone through this. And they ask me, Zell, what do I got to do? And I've been able to share what we have to do. So I'm just asking you to consider support of this bill. As we move forward, we can protect other families from this travesty.
Hi, my name is Noel Eisenman. I had a testimony written, but I'm not going to be able to add to the emotional testimony. I worked with my brothers for 7 years after I graduated from Michigan State University. Left the family farm and have been working for Michigan Agricultural Commodities for the past 25 years. We're the largest grain handler in Michigan. In our company, we have those people, like Barb said, an HR person that would make that call. I was in the barn that night. None of us thought of making that call. So I stand here representing all the thousands of Michigan ag customers that might also face this someday, and ask that there would be leniency for the family farm. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do have a few questions up here if you folks are willing to take them. Rep. Leitner?
Thank you. Mine's more of a comment. Thank you for coming once again. I find it shameful that we haven't been able to get something so simple across the finish line in 3 freaking terms. As a fellow farmer and someone who, we have less than 10 employees, obviously, but, we're in the hay industry. But, every time we hear of a story like this, a situation that happens, an accident that happens, yours was a roofing situation, in my area, it was Rex with a manure spreader. I think a lot of us take precautions on our own farms to make sure things like that don't happen. I understand that there's a purpose and a place for MIOSHA, but again, I'll reiterate that sometimes some of that stuff is just ridiculous, and I find it shameful that we treat people like criminals for not reporting an incident on their farm at home. When we're letting, because I'm on the criminal justice side, when we're letting actual criminals out and off the hook on things financially every day. So I will just tell you as a fellow farmer, my heart goes out to you guys. I know it's been a few years, but again, I will work with our chair and do whatever we can, use our relationships on the Senate side to hopefully get this done this time. Because again, like I said, I find it shameful. Something that seems so simple to me, we can't actually get done. And I hope that we don't fail you once again.
Representative Pies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I cannot tell you the depth of my sorrow over this. This is, to say that it's insult to injury is really an understatement. And I'm so sorry for that. A question, you knew about the law. It was really just a matter of time, correct? Of not having the time to be able to report it. But you knew that it existed already, though, correct?
I was not aware of it.
Or, okay. He ran the farm, of course he would know. But you had mentioned something, you had mentioned the $5,000 fine, and then you had mentioned that there was an additional $12,000. Was that somehow related to this?
Yeah. Throughout the investigation, I mean, the reporting fine was pretty cut and dry in their eyes because it was, and back to Rep. Leitner's, question about the first responders or the local authorities making a reporting, and for them to show up on our farm within a week with a well-documented inspection report, they knew somehow, whether we reported it or not, whether it was through the coroner, the sheriff, the EMTs, I don't know, but there evidently was a way they found out.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah.
I just want to say, I asked my OSHA representative that spoke with me right before I asked him to leave my property, how did you find this out? And he said, we have people reading the newspapers to look for these kinds of things. That was his answer to me.
But through one of the investigative meetings we had on the farm, I mean, they were very thorough. They looked at the ladder. They made sure the ladder had bumpers on the bottom, if the ladder was functional. And basically the fine was for not inspecting the roof thoroughly, not having a spotter, and there was one other I can't recall, and then not having a harness. And for those 3 things, we were fined the additional penalty.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I drive around now and I see roofers that don't have harnesses on, and I see it all the time, and I'm sure you do too. And how many times do you go on a roof or something and wear a harness?
Mm-hmm.
But in our discussion with him, there's a very fine line between personal and business.
especially in a farm, where you have a barn that you use for the business. And that's one thing he asked us. He wanted inventory in our barns, what was personal and what was farm. Even those were personal buildings, we had more farm equipment in them than we did boats and campers. So then they determined that it was a business, even though it was personally owned. So there's a fine line in there with business and personal with MIOSHA, and that's probably a whole nother discussion, but those were the fines,
Yeah.
the reasons for the fines.
I remember this from last term about the barn that was actually being used, and it's how it was being used on the farm.
Yep.
So maybe this additional fine is maybe something we need to look at too in the future.
In discussions with him, I mean, it's such a gray area, you know, I'm sure you all have personal buildings on your property, and maybe they're used for a small business, but he says if you would go out with a screwdriver and put tin on your building or something, and heaven forbid have an accident, they could come and, just like he told me about your wife falling down the stairs and you're under MIOSHA.
Yeah.
So it's a personal farms, private farms, and business is a real delicate issue in their eyes.
Thank you for the clarification.
Representative Kuntz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming again. I'm sorry for your loss, and I'm embarrassed by the actions of the state of Michigan. I apologize. I have nothing to do with OSHA, but I just apologize at the way you were mistreated. That's embarrassing. I'm sorry. I will echo, I was going to say Senator Leitner, congratulations. Representative Leitner, Representative Nyer, that we will do whatever we can. This is terrible. It shouldn't have happened, and thank you for coming to help others. That speaks just incredibly highly of your character. So my apologies for your loss, but we will get this done.
One thing I did want to mention, in the committee, in the Agriculture Committee, the first time that we met, Representative Alexander pursued asking MIOSHA several times whether they could have reduced that fine, and they were told they kept skirting around the issue, and she finally pinned them down to the point where they said they probably could have reduced it, but they chose not to reduce it. So you can read into that what that means. And that was disheartening to all of us, because we did try an appeal the first time and were unsuccessful with our appeal.
Thank you again for willing to come and speak to us there. You put a certain sense of urgency back into the need to fix it. Clearly, these departments have discretion. This time they chose not to operate that, and we're going to take the best course we can to solve this problem. Thank you again. Not seeing it. One more question from Wartz, if you can.
Yeah, I too would just like to echo sentiments of thanks. I lost my brother tragically 7 years ago and was the first one that arrived. And so everything that you're describing, 110% agree with. You're in a state of shock, and the last thing you think of, and you really do assume the authorities that you call in to handle it take care of the things that you need them to take care of. And so I'm truly sorry for your loss. Again, my concern is that this isn't broad enough, and you brought it up. I asked about in-law, but it doesn't even, like you said, count sibling. I have 2 cousins that farm together that are the next generation to take over. Right now they would be covered because their dads are both still involved, but that if the dads die and they're just cousins, so what I'm being told is this can't be changed in our state, because if we do, then we won't have support through to the governor. Would you agree with that? Is there things federally, is the federal government aware? Have you guys lobbied at all at the federal level on this, especially now that we have maybe a new administration? Do you think there's potential there? I had in my mind, I've
I've gone over that in my mind a lot, considered taking on that fight at the federal level. Emotionally, I haven't been in a place that I felt like I could do that. I did contact the Department of Agriculture right after when we first got fined to see if there was anything that they could help us with on that. And I was told that this was federal laws were in place, therefore Michigan laws had to abide by that. And they don't have to have exactly, but very closely, otherwise they will lose the funding. And that was reiterated by MIOSHA several times in their testimony, that that was so important. Obviously, I understand that. You don't want to lose a large amount of funding, but in the big picture of everything, seeing how many times is that going to happen in the versus of the big picture of everything, that was disheartening to me, because I basically feel it's all about the money.
Well, I just want to speak to your question. When we were going through the investigative process, we kept asking that question about, we're family. This is a family farm. And I don't know how many times he repeated it, probably, if not 10, 100 times, that he said we were finding the entity, not the farm, not us personally. They're finding the entity. And we kept telling him that, who owns the entity? And he says, we're finding the entity. We own the entity. We're stockholders in the entity. We're finding the entity. So he took the personal part of it completely out by training, maybe? I don't know. But it was pretty disheartening, his response to us being brothers and a family.
If you could, Representative Pice has another question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and this may actually be a question for you. You had brought up that perhaps the definition of family, or you had questioned what that could be and if it was the governor or not, which led me to think then, is MIOSHA defined, or do we go by state or federal, or is there even a definition of this for?
From my understanding, the governor wished to have the federal definition.
Also, there was
and that's the reason. The reason for the veto the first time there is that it did not follow the federal definition of a family farm underneath MIOSHA's eyes.
Okay, and then there's not a definition at the state level.
They follow the Fed.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
Here's another thing you might not be aware of as well. When I talked to Representative Colley, she informed me that there was 2 or 3 points. There was, I think, 3 or 4 maybe points. But she said one of the points that they objected to when they vetoed the bill at that time was not even in the bill. So there was an objection, a written objection to something that was not even had been in the bill, that had already been changed. That was disheartening for me to hear that.
Not seeing any further questions there, I'll read in the cards. Ryan Seabolt from Michigan AFL-CIO wishes not to speak, but opposes the bill. Rebecca Parks from Michigan Farm Bureau wishes not to speak, but supports the bill. At this time, Representative Leitner moves to excuse any absent members. There being no objections, the motion prevails by unanimous consent. At this time, seeing having no other business before the committee, we are adjourned.